Thanks. Welcome for this session about Spring Boot for DevOps. Who never attended one of my talks so far? Oh, everyone. OK, so I have to introduce myself. I'm Nicolas Fra nkel. I'm a developer, an architect. That depends on who is developer in this room. Who likes architects in this room? Not so many, so I'm a developer. I've always worked as a consultant for about 15 years. I've done a lot of projects in insurance, banking, telco, retail, public sector as well. I'm a teacher as well as a trainer. I'm a blogger. I work for Hybris. Who knows about Hybris so far? Only one? Hey, come on. Everyone is coming to me and saying, hey, we know about Hybris. Hybris is so cool. Hybris is an e-commerce shop, and we have been bought by SAP. So if you would like to know more about Hybris, then go visit their page, and then they will send me there in our conferences, which is cool for me and for you as well, I hope. OK, back to the subject at hand. So it's Spring Boot for DevOps. And in this context, what is DevOps? Who knows about Devops so far? A little? OK, nearly everyone. So will I be speaking about dev and ops collaboration? I'm sorry about that. Spring Boot cannot help you in this regard. Spring Boot is always only a framework. Is it treating your infrastructure as code? In this case, Spring Boot cannot help you. There is Chef, there is Puppet, there is Ansible. There is Vagrant, there is many tools that can help you do that, as well as to automate everything. So for this talk, DevOps will be only, but this is still very important, about your application and your application metadata, how you can monitor your application and its health, and how can it give you metrics. So this is the only stuff that we will consider for this talk. First, let me tell you a little story. As you can infer, it's not a very nice story, but it's still a story nonetheless. So nearly everyone here is a developer. You develop application, and you've just developed an application. You're very happy. It's Friday evening. You call the ops guy and say, hey, you know, my app is now ready. Please push it into production. Because you've done your job, now it's his job. OK? And then he asks you, OK, where do I find the manual on how I can, check the configuration, and if there is an exception, what should I do? And you are very proud, because you're an experienced developer. You provide him the manual that you have taken so long to write. Yeah, it's a pain, right? But you did it. You're very proud. You give it to him. Great. And he says, OK, but then how do I configure the application? Because all those developer guys, they always put everything in their war. But you're a smart developer, so you've externalized everything in a property file, and you've documented it in the manual. And then you're very proud. You say, hey, it's here. Look, you can have this parameter. It does this. Great. And then comes the final question. Hey, thanks, but how do I monitor your application? You forgot something. You forgot how to monitor the application. But you didn't forget. It was never written in the specifications. Isn't that true? I mean, the problem is that the specifications are about business features, and monitoring and health checks and this kind of stuff, the business doesn't care about. It even doesn't know about it. And it doesn't even want to consider it exists. So it's a given. It's like if in the spec you expect something about the database. It doesn't care. That's not his problem. It's expected. So at this point, you have three options. The first option is to go back to your project manager on Friday evening and asking about more budget and more time. That doesn't sound so cool because your project manager will probably shout at you and give you a very bad annual review. They don't want that. You know, it's your problem, it's not his problem. You forgot about it. Second option is that your project manager also happens to be your friend, and then you can just push him a little, and then he will say to the ops guy, no, you put this app in production because it's business critical, we just need it on Monday morning. Then, what happens? There will probably be a bug or something, but the ops guy will say, that's not my problem, and you will be the one to be called at 3 a.m. in the morning to repair it, to fix it. The final option is, hey, it's Friday evening, right? You know what I mean. Yeah, days have 24 hours, and the weekend has 2 days. So you can hack something very quickly during the weekend. Of course, I don't like any of these options. And I think that Spring Boot really did something very nice for us in this regard. Even if you don't take that to these extreme limits, I had enough, really, for every one of my projects, hack something custom to provide monitoring and metadata. It's extremely not acceptable. You know, it's just time wasting. So, I said those are not in the specifications, and there are many stuff that are not in specifications. But generally speaking, we have these non-functional requirements that should be in the specs but are not, but we can add them. It's about metadata, so what is your application? What is the version of your application? How do you do right now to know the version of your deployed application? It's always a mess. And also about monitoring. Monitoring is about two things. It's about health checks, so are the dependencies of my application running correctly? Because if the dependencies are not running correctly, there is no chance my application is running correctly. And it's about metrics. So even if all the dependencies of my application are running correctly, perhaps for some reasons, there is a bottleneck somewhere, and the response time of one page or all my pages is extremely high, and I want to monitor that. Of course, since we are talking about Spring, I would like to have nice stuff, such as, I would like to know which beans are really inside my factory, which is always, when you have real-world application, not just hello worlds, you know, you really want to have that. Also, I would like to have the real value of the property in this environment, or about the controller mappings. Because even if you are using explicit wiring every time, there is some things such as controller mappings that are only about annotation, and you don't have a real view of them. So, I talked too much already. You want demo? This is a Spring Pet Clinic. Who knows about the Spring Pet Clinic? Nobody knows about, yeah, great. So the Spring Pet Clinic has been an old project that was meant to display the Spring framework capabilities. So it has controllers, everything, and someone was kind enough to redo it with Spring Boot. So he added the layer that make use of Spring Boot. So I launched it, and now what I will do is just, it's already at the page, and here I can log in. And here I can, So there is even a menu for errors to check that, you catch errors in the good way. Here you can have search, and you can have paging, and here you can also have paging. You can view XML stuff of the page. Well, features of Spring Boot, Spring in general. So this is done with Spring Boot. And let's say that this is the application I was developing. How can I monitor it? That's quite easy. And if you need to remind something of this talk, if there is a single thing that you need to remember, is this one. I will add something called the Spring Boot starter actuator. Yeah, it's quite long. I will give you the reference for the GitHub project, so you don't need to write everything down. And then if I restart, so it just takes a little time each time, but don't worry. Meanwhile, I can try to, no, it's done. I don't need anything. So, and now, if I go, for example, I wanted to say, I wanted the metrics. Now, I have some JSON. I didn't write a single line of code, and I have JSON. Here, I will have the else checks. Here, I will have the mappings. Okay, this is quite verbose. So the first thing to do when you have that, I will have the config props also. The first thing to do is to go to your application.properties, which is a Spring Boot main configuration file, and to add this line. Spring JSON serialization indent output, because I want something which is readable by a human being, not only by a machine. I restart. So for a demo, it's quite long, but for a normal application, it starts very quickly. And now I have the same stuff, but in a readable state. And here, I have the state of all my configuration for this application. Here, I have, all the Spring Beans. And this is very important because it's very hard to know about the exact state of your factory beans. Of course, I told you here also other mappings. So you see that, yeah, you can type, I don't know, hoops, and it's a valid mapping. Right? If I type inbox, I just check that there is a get method. Yeah, there is also a valid mapping. So you can have a JSON view of all the mappings of all the controllers in your application. That's quite good. Okay, so this is the basics of the Spring Boot. And now, let's talk about metadata. So I asked you previously, the most important thing, at least for me, is, okay, what version of my application is deployed? If you don't have any automated deployment stuff, which might be or not the case, you can hack something. You can have a property file, and you can source it through Maven, and then you can read it in your application and do something like this. It works, and you have to do it every time for every project. You can also have dummy information. You can have your application ID. You can have your group ID from Maven. This is a kind of information that matters to me. Perhaps I have a crawler, or I want to create a crawler that crawls every URL and get those information, aggregates them in a wiki page. This is really DevOps stuff. This is really important. So how can you do that? I will use my application. The first thing is, oh, sorry about that. Application.properties, anything I put in there prefixed with info will find its way in an endpoint called info. So here I will create a dummy information. Also, I can take everything I get from the POM. let's say I want info.application and I want my group ID. So if you know about Maven filtering, probably you would do something like, oh fuck, sorry about that. I just changed my keyboard. I love that. No, oh no, okay. Let's imagine here you have a dollar sign. And you would say something like project.groupID, which is exactly what you would do if you used Maven filtering. Who knows about Maven filtering? Not so many people, okay. So for those who don't, you can take anything from your pom.xml and you can filter it, which means that during the build, Maven will read the information from your POM and put it in any of the file you want. So if you have a property file, you can filter it and have this kind of information. Remember, here is a dollar sign. But Spring Boot already provides it for you. And if I use, no, please, don't do that to me. Yes, if you use this, how do you call it in English? Arrow base? At, okay, at is even easier. If you use at, and if you inherit from the Spring Boot starter parent, Spring Boot has already this configured for you. So now, if I restart the application, whoa, is this for me? Impressive. And I navigate to the info endpoint. Okay, and I did code nothing. It was only configuration, right? How cool is that? Quite cool, right? And yeah. Sorry again? Yeah, exactly. So you can have whatever you want. You can have source stuff from your POM. And I will just, for the beauty of the thing, add the application, the artifact ID. And I will as well add the version. Okay, at this point you understood my point, right? But I want more. I want stuff that is not found in the pom.xml. For example, let's say that I want GitHub information, Git information. What can I do? Well, there is a plugin, a Maven plugin, that outputs information from your Git repository into a property file. And since I never remember it, yes, goldfish memory, but it's quite big, so you will please excuse me if I just copy-paste from my history. I love this kind of stuff because then I can rely on it. And if I see my build, and I can add a new plugin like this. No, like this. So it's a little bit big. So it's git commit ID plugin. And the goal I want to call is revision. It will be called during the process sources phase, if you're really interested about it. But the meat is probably there, because by default, it will just output it in the log file when it's built, which is not very interesting. So you have to tell the plugin to generate the file, right? So that's the first parameter. The second parameter is the problem I see with this stuff is that it generates it under SSC main resources. And it's not a source file. I don't want to put it in my repo file. So you have to tell it explicitly to build it under the normal classes path in the target. So this is exactly what I tell it here. And now if I rebuild the stuff, you can see that there is something which appeared here. So he's trying to create the stuff. And if I navigate on my project, and I go to targets, classes, here you can see that a new file appeared. Oh. Never rebuild your computer just before talk. That's a really bad idea. Yeah. Okay, I guess it's a little small, but just believe me, it took every information from your Git repository, including the branch you were there, the version, everything, and put it here. Okay? Now, if I navigate to my info endpoint again, I have more information. Of course, I have the information I took from my POM file, but it also tells me the branch and the commit and stuff. Now the question you can ask me now is, yeah, I only have 3 more information, and here I have like, yeah, nearly more than 20 information. Where did it come from? Yeah, and that's where I'm not very happy with Spring Boot, is that they created a class with only 3 attributes and only read those 3 attributes. So if you want everything, that's quite easy. In fact, you can create your own info endpoints, and instead of reading the file with the structure with only 3 attributes, you put it into a map. And it works. It works quite well, actually. But the good thing is here I only have configuration. I have everything I need, right? Okay, so metadata, I got any information I wanted. I got everything I wanted from the POM. I got limited GitHub info. If I want more, I can code it quite easily. So about health checks. Health checks basically will check your dependencies. Every application I know that is behind a hello world has dependencies. Generally speaking, traditionally, it has been the database. The database is your first and foremost dependency. It can be an Oracle database, it can be MongoDB, it can be anything. You need to persist your data, generally speaking. Now, what we see nowadays is that you have more dependencies. Most probably, your application requires web services. Or, I don't know, Solar, or anything. And all those dependencies are really a requirement for your application. So why bother launching or doing anything if those dependencies are not there? So those dependencies should be checked first. And you should check them first, because it's always unpleasant when a customer calls you and tells you, hey, your application is down. You should be the first to be informed if your application is down. So what Spring Boot does, it will read those dependencies, and then it will wrap them under an indicator, a health indicator, and a health object. And so every time you check this, it will return an health object related to this dependency, and this health object has a status. The status basically can be up, yeah, it works, or down, no, it doesn't work. They created more statuses if you already did them, like, oh, we don't know. Yeah, too bad. Or out of service, that it's really down and forever. Okay? And you can provide more details. Afterwards, the health endpoint will aggregate all the checks. So each check gives a health object. So it will look at all the health objects. If at least one of your health checks return a down status or an unknown status, then the application will be flagged as down itself. And the good thing is you don't need only the JSON. The JSON is probably for you, but most of the shops I know, let's face it, the ops team is not very bright and they have problem passing the JSON, or they don't have the right tools and they don't care. So their tools at least can read the HTTP code. So if your application is down, because at least one of the dependencies is down, then the HTTP code will start with 5 or something. Okay? So let's check our own and see how many dependencies we have. And here we see that we have 2 dependencies, the DB dependencies and the disk space, because hey, probably we are writing something on disk, so it's nice to see that we have enough disk space. Since both are up, the application is considered up. Now what I will do, I will add a new dependency here in my dependency list, and I will say that it is Spring Boot Starter Data Solar. What exactly it does is not very important. Basically, what you just have to know at this point is that when it starts, Spring Boot will look for a Solar instance running on localhost port, I don't remember which one, and since I did nothing, it will be missing. So here, I explicitly added a dependency that doesn't work. And here, you see that the application is now down, and that this dependency Solar is flagged as down because, of course, it doesn't find anything at this host and this port. And if you really want to believe me, we can check that here, when we check the network, here is 5 or something. So the HTTP status code is enough to tell you that your application is down. Okay? Of course, I told you about web services, and it's not very easy to tell if a web service is up or down. Even with databases, perhaps the check that Spring Boot makes is not enough, because right now I didn't tell you if it was just a simple GET connection to the database, or if it was a GET connection plus a select dual from dual or anything. So perhaps you might want to have a multiple layer of dependencies checks. Or again, you might have something that you want to call a web service and check that it works really good. So how can you do that? You have an interface for that called health indicator. So let's create an health indicator for us. I will add a new Java class called health config. And I will add a configuration. And now we'll create a new bean. And it returns, I told you, a health indicator. Dummy check. Return new health indicator. And since it's an interface, I have to implement it. And here, I told you, I will return a health object. Health object uses a builder pattern. So I can say, let's say that it's up, and with services, with details, sorry, like foo, and the value bor. And here I build it. Thanks. So now what should happen is that a new else check should appear here. Too soon, too soon, too soon. Good. So here I've made a check. The status is up, and yeah, this is the details I provided, because you can provide any details you want. If you really don't like, because here you can see that the name of the check is the name of your bean. And perhaps you want spaces. Or not, I don't know. It's very easy to do that. You just provide here a new check. Sorry, it must be name. So if I call the bean with a specific name, it will be the name of the check in my list. So they thought about everything. Even picky developers, a new check. Okay? And the last thing I want to tell you is about metrics. Basically, who knows about drop wizard metrics? Great, that's good. So the guy Rock, the Kodal is a man behind that, he rocks. He created a new metrics model, just like at JavaDay created a real good time model. And you have this library called drop wizard metrics, which gives you the model to the metrics, as well as the exporters. And we will see just afterwards what are those exporters, and much more, but it's outside the scope of this talk. Basically, they created the model with one simple ID. What is a gauge? A gauge is a value. Okay? And for example, the response time of a page can be modeled as a gauge. You can go to the page, check the response time, gives you a value, then afterwards you do the same, gives you another value, and so on and so forth. And you have the counter. And the counter is a gauge that is incremented each time by 1. The number of page viewed is basically a counter. Because if you view a page, it gives you x, then if you view it again, it's x plus 1. So simple model, like crazily simple, but really efficient. And this kind of metrics I already have. Let's see if I go there. I have the total memory, the free memory. Is it perhaps not big enough? Okay, the peaks, the classes loaded, and so on and so forth. And here, sorry, we can see that we have gauges. So the response time of the else page, the last time was 138, and the response time of the metrics page was 9. So if I reload it again, it's free now. Good thing. Here it didn't change. Too bad. And here the counter status of the metrics page gave a 200 2 times, and here the else gave a 503 1 time. And if I check it again, here it should give me a 3 there because it's incremented each time by 1. And if I reload, what will happen? Great. So you understood the stuff. This metric stuff is very interesting, but for your ops guy, that's not very exploitable because you have to reload the page each time to get new metrics. So what can we do? Basically, what we can do is to send all those metrics to gconsole. Who knows about gconsole? Okay, great. So gconsole is this kind of stuff, and if you don't know about it, I would really encourage you to have a look at it. I hope it's in the path, yes. So I will connect to my Spring Boot application. I know that it's about Plexus. I will connect it. Yes, in secure connection. And here, I can have a look at the objects that are wrapped into mbeans. So gconsole is a view into your GMX server. GMX, who knows about GMX? Nearly everyone, great. So GMX basically is an API to wrap your objects into so-called mbeans, so you can administer them, you can call operation, you can call setters, you can call getters, and of course you restrict them. Okay, so I want to put those metrics into the GMX, into gconsole. What I will do is I will create a new configuration class, and I will call it metrics config. I will create a new bean. And here you have to be very careful. I don't know why, but you have to add an extra stuff, which is export metric writer. And here you will have a metric, I think it's metric writer, right? And it's GMX writer. And just let me a little refresh my memory again. Export to GMX. Yeah, GMX metric writer. Metric writer. And here I require a metric registry. So what I will do is I will say, a metric exporter. I will here have a GMX, metric exporter. Mbean exporter, sorry. Okay, and here, at this point, I don't know why it doesn't work. Why? Because there are two beans of such type. So Spring will tell me that, hey, too bad, you are expecting one, but there are two. So it tells me I have found an mbean exporter and an endpoint bean exporter. So I will have to copy the name of the stuff, say, I will this bean and restart. Now, if I go, of course, the JVM previous one has been cancelled. So here I will create a new connection, and I will check Plexus. And we see here that we have a new route appearing called, yeah, I'll let you check. I'm sorry, I cannot make it bigger. But then if I go to my application, and I don't need that anymore. I go to the oops endpoint, for example, and to the find owners, and to error veterinarian owners. That we see here that we've got everything that was in the metrics page in GMX. So all those endpoints are here. Okay? So we have it in GMX. Now at this point, we can go further. And you know, Drop Wizard, I told you, is a really cool library. And it has exporters for HTTP. But we already have that in HTTP without Drop Wizard. It exports to GMX, but we already have it without Drop Wizard. What we don't have out of the box is an export to Graphite. Who knows about Graphite? One people. Okay, that's good. So Graphite basically is a dashboard for your metrics. And dashboard for your metrics is very important because here, if I check the gconsole, I won't see the trend. So I want a dashboard, right? I don't have enough time to provide you with this, but you can have something, and you will be able to check in the GitHub repository. You will be able to do the exact same thing I did with gconsole to Graphite. It only requires one additional library, which is one library from Drop Wizard called Metrics Graphite. The problem with if you are using Graphite in development is that it takes resources. It's completely useless. You don't want to have Graphite on your development machine. And if you don't have Graphite, then each time you are sending metrics to something which doesn't exist, you will have tons of log in your console, which you don't want. So you have two options for that. Either you define one GMX reporter and one Graphite reporter, and then you use Spring Boot conditional stuff to say, okay, the GMX one will be matched with the profile development, and the other one will only activate if the other one is not set, which is acceptable, but for me more configuration. Or you can deal with your ops guy, and that's what we dealt, that we will only send stuff to GMX, and that's good because that means that your application is not responsible for sending to Graphite. Okay? And then something called GMX trends will take the data from your JVM and put it into Graphite. That's what we did. Metrics are not only technical. And as you can see, it's not much. You can probably do that even if you are not familiar with it in less than a day. If you need a budget for that, you can convince the business that the metrics are not only technical. Probably they might be interested in other sort of metrics. Then you can weave in, and then you also can put into your metric registry. Miscellaneous stuff, you can have an hyperstate at the engine of application states. Hypermedia as the engine of application states, meaning that here I knew about the endpoints, just magically, because it's in the doc. But I don't remember whose speaker said, no, you shouldn't, you should do REST properly. If you really want real REST, you can add the Spring Boot starter @OAS stuff, and then you can go to the roots /@OAS, and then you can auto-discover all the endpoints. The second stuff is, of course, it's not very convenient to have everything at the root, right? So you might want to do something very easy, which is go to your application property and just get this management context path. And now if I restart the application, every endpoint I showed you will be managed under this endpoint. Too soon. Yes. And now, of course, if I go at the root, it has disappeared. Okay? So this might be interesting for you because, yeah, both in conjunction, then you can tell your ops, yeah, you can auto-discover this on @OS and they do whatever they want. Okay, you can find the sources of this presentation at the following GitHub. There is a branch called Devops 1.3. Devops because this is the name of the talk, and 1.3 because in the version of Spring Boot I used, which is not the last one, but it's 1M4, I think. If I catch your attention, you can follow me on Twitter, you can be my friend on LinkedIn, you can read my blog, and you can buy my book, which of course is a very good book about integration testing. That said, do you have any question? Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, not at the moment. You probably have to send them to Kibana. I don't know how how it's done in Kibana, but probably you can find an exporter to the Kibana stuff underneath, and then you will have Kibana read this directly. Other questions? Yeah. Yes, there is a you can have two things basically. You can say that endpoints are sensitive or not, and for each endpoint you can tell, yeah, it's sensitive, and then it will be protected by a Spring security. And if you really want to go beyond, then, as I showed, you can put everything into a subcontext and code whatever you want there. Other questions? Yep.
We have several applications which are under Spring Boot control. Can we just combine them in the application which aggregate the result?
I would advise against it, because what you want is to have the finest granularity possible. Then, of course, then it will be your ops team which might aggregate them, but each application should be only responsible for its own stuff. In this case, yeah, it's not meant to do like that. It's for development purpose, but yeah, it's built underneath, yeah. Okay, it's a Maven question, and you have two possibilities. You have skip tests, and you have maven.test.skip equals true. One of them, and I never remember them, doesn't even compile the test, which I really strongly advocate against, because you might break everything and not even think about it. Here, I don't know if there are tests, but if I run like this, skip tests. No, it doesn't run any tests anyway. Because here, what we are not calling a phase in the Maven lifecycle. We are just calling the plugin itself. So it doesn't run any tests. Yep. You're on your own. In Washington at Spring 1, I have asked the guys if it was easy to bring the actuator into Spring standard application. They told me it's not trivial, which probably means it's a lot of pain. So I think it would be much easier to migrate to Spring Boot. Okay, thank you very much, and have fun.